Welcome back to Valerie's New York. I'm Valerie Smaldone. Always great fun doing this program. I love to do it because I get to learn about places and things and events, and I get to meet such interesting people. Jeffrey Gurian is someone I've known for a while. Our paths have crossed on many occasions. We have met at many different events, and I've gotten to know him over the years. At first I thought he was a kook. I thought, what a kooky guy. But he's really smart, and he's really nice, and he's really funny, and he really connects people together, and he also always walks around with a spoon in his pocket, which is probably one of his unique characteristics. We'll talk about the spoon in a moment. Jeffrey, welcome to Valerie's New York.
Thank you, Valerie. You're one of the only people in the world that I put on headphones for. You know what that does to my hair?
I know. It messes up my hair, too.
Only for Valerie Smaldone would I do that.
It messes up my hair, too.
Yeah.
You also have a jumbo writing implement there. What is
Oh,
that?
that's my big pen. Yeah, it's for big deals. I like to carry things that make me smile. It's funny. I do it really for me. I have a house filled with toys, crayons, balloons. It's a concept of mine that I think everybody should create their own happiness center. Because once you leave the house, you can't control anything that happens to you. It's up to what the universe has in store for you. The only place you can hope to control your environment is where you live. So you should surround yourself with things that make you smile. And I do that because it's important to walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
And you carry some of it on your person.
I carry many things with me that when I see them, they make me smile.
Is there a balloon in there today?
No, the balloons are home.
Okay. Well, let me explain a little bit more about
Yeah.
you, Jeffrey, because I mentioned before the break that you were a dentist and a teacher, but you say, well, it's kind of really not my job. I'm really more of a comedy writer. And
Well, it's actually a bizarre rumor that I'm a dentist. And do you know when that rumor started?
when you graduated dental school?
Exactly.
Okay.
That day, and it's never stopped. I can't get away from it. It's the
And
most
you
bizarre
do
thing.
teach in
I
a
teach, yeah.
very prestigious dental
Right, I
school
teach at
institution.
NYU in the mornings.
Mhm.
I teach. I'm a professor in oral medicine and radiology, and it's important for me to do that because I'm also very involved in healing work, and healing work is very ethereal. It's like I think it's important when you do stuff like that, energy transfer, and I use it for treating depression and physical illness, that stress-related illness that has a TMJ connection. A lot of people who are stressed out clench and grind their teeth, and they get very bad headaches. And I developed a healing technique to treat that, a very non-invasive, gentle technique. And I think it's important when you do that kind of work to be connected to a major university. Otherwise, you could come across like a lunatic.
Absolutely.
Right.
And they allow you to do this at NYU.
Yes. They've actually asked me to create a program for the senior students to show them how to use touch in a way to calm patients down. I think that's a very important thing, and I'd love to teach it to physicians as well, because not enough doctors touch their patients, and it could be something as simple as just a hand on the shoulder. If someone does that, it's amazing the power of touch. It's the most powerful of all our senses. And just something simple like that can make a patient feel so relaxed. And so many, especially physicians, I mean, dentists touch people all the time. We work intimately. You know, you're cradling someone's head in your hand, so how much closer can you get?
Mhm.
But physicians very often don't touch, they don't shake hands, they don't do these little things that can make a person feel calm and relaxed.
Well, that's such an important part of healing, as you know, but I think that we have a long way to go, certainly in this country, in that whole endeavor.
Absolutely.
Couple of things,
Yeah.
because there's a lot to talk about with you. The dentistry, the healing, the comedy writing that you do. You have a blog, you're out and about, always. in
Every
New York.
minute.
Every minute you're out and about in New York City. But you also have developed a way to deal with stuttering, and it's so timely, Jeffrey, because this beautiful movie came out, The King's Speech, that won all kinds of awards at the Oscars, and people were so taken by this problem that this royal individual had and how he overcame it with the therapist. Tell me your story. You were dealing with this since you were a child.
Right, I started stuttering when I was about 6 or 7 years old. A lot of stutterers start young. The important fact about that is that you start speaking when you're about 2. And I was speaking fine for a few years until I developed a stutter. And my stutter got so bad that it got to the point where I was a blocker. I stuttered where, you know, you repeat a syllable, you repeat a sound but I was also a blocker where, due to nervousness, nothing would come out at all. I remember in high school being called upon, and I stood at my desk, and no words would come out at all. And I can feel it as if it happened yesterday. I just turned red. The humiliation of standing there, everybody's looking at you, and nothing will come out at all. I couldn't say Gurian. Most stutterers have a hard time saying their names, because your name is your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not happy with your identity, it's hard to tell people who you are. And my parents sent me to many speech therapists, and no one was able to help me, because even these days, it's not clear to a lot of speech therapists how to treat stuttering. It's one of the confusing things. And one of the things that I tell people who I work with, I'm not a classically trained speech therapist at all, but I overcame the problem. And who would you rather learn from? Someone who learned it from a book, or someone who actually was able to do it themselves? Which doesn't mean that you have to have a heart attack to be a cardiologist.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to have every illness in order to treat it. But because I'm firmly convinced that this is a psychological thing, and I know that because of the way I cured myself, I think it helps to have experience with it in treating other people.
Okay, so at what age did you start to think, if nobody is going to help me, I have to figure this out myself?
That's a great question. When I went to college, in my freshman year, I was determined that, I had this thought, I'm going to run for the president of the freshman class, but I couldn't say my name. And I told myself, if I could win this election, I won't have to stutter anymore, because it'll prove to me that people like me. I had some inkling that it had to do with how I felt about myself, that it was a combination of low self-esteem, maybe a poor self-image. Somewhere along the way, I gave myself a negative self-image. And I remember thinking very clearly that if I could win the election, I'd no longer have to stutter, because stuttering was making my life miserable, socially, in every possible way. And I couldn't introduce myself to people because I couldn't say my name, so I had other kids act as my campaign managers, and they would take me and introduce me and say, this is Jeffrey Gurian, he's running for freshman president. And after I got a few words out, I could start to talk. Well, it was a great lesson for me, because I won the election, and I was the president of the freshman class, and I still stuttered. And it taught me that outside validation doesn't work in life. It doesn't matter how many people tell you that you're fantastic and talented and gorgeous and handsome, or whatever compliments they give you. It matters what you think of yourself. And I came to the realization that when I was alone in a room, I didn't stutter. And that's true for many, many stutterers. I would say probably for most stutterers. They don't stutter when they're by themselves. They only stutter when they're trying to talk to someone else. And I realized, if I don't stutter all the time, if there's a place that I can go where I don't stutter, then it means that there's really nothing wrong with me.
So you were able to go by yourself into a room and read
And speak perfectly. I could say
fine.
I could say Gurian.
Wow.
I could say anything with a hard D, a hard G. Any of the sounds that are hard for stutterers, very often T's are very hard.
Mm-hmm.
I could say every word perfectly. But as soon as I had to say it to you, I would stutter and I would block. And I said to myself, you know what? I'm not going to go through my whole life like this. If no one can help me, I am going to become obsessed with figuring out how to stop stuttering. And I took the next 2 years. I made myself a project. And I was obsessed with releasing myself from what I call the bondage of stuttering. And I started to look in books, and I saw there wasn't a lot of information, but I did things like an honest examination of myself. I remember one thing I did was I made 2 lists, good and bad. All the things I didn't like about myself, and all the things that I did like about myself. And I started to see that the good things overweighed the bad things. And I started to build up my positive image. I created affirmations for myself, which is one of the things that I use today in my healing work, because affirmations affect your subconscious mind. The interesting thing is that your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth and fiction. It believes what you tell it. If you tell yourself you're a loser, you'll manifest that in your life.
Mm-hmm.
If you tell yourself that you're a winner, you'll also manifest that in your life. You bring into your life, your thoughts manifest your reality. So I started creating affirmations like, there is no need for me to stutter. I no longer have the need, because I felt like it was some need. My subconscious mind created this need for me to stutter. And what that was, I look at it as a weird habit. When people react to stress, there are only so many things they can do. If you listed human habits, maybe you'll get 10 or 12. You could bite your nails, you could blink your eye nervously, you could tap your foot, twist your hair, cut yourself. I mean, but it's not a never-ending list. And to me, stuttering is one of those things. No child ever says, I think I should start stuttering. It's not a conscious choice. It's a subconscious choice in a reaction to whatever happens to be going on in your life at the time. And so I examine my early life, and I teach the stutterers who I work with, it's not important to ever figure out exactly why you started stuttering, but it's important to look at all of the possibilities.
So at this young age, you were still a young guy.
Yeah,
18,
I was in my,
19?
well, yeah, and I stopped basically when I was in my 20s, but you know that I still feel it today. I haven't stuttered in many years, but I could start stuttering tomorrow. I refuse to allow myself to stutter. I challenge myself doing this. You know, I'm on radio, on television. I make myself, I confront my fear on a daily basis, because public speaking is everybody's greatest fear. If you look at a list of fears, that's the greatest for people
Before
to
death.
address exactly.
Yes, yes.
People would rather die than that. So The King's Speech was such a wonderful film because it brought out what this guy had to go through. And Lionel Logue was considered a very unconventional kind of speech therapist. And it was funny because one of the people that I work with, who's a stutterer, called me right afterwards, and he goes, he does a lot of stuff that you do, you know? I make people read out loud a lot by themselves so that they can get used to hearing how nice their voice sounds without stuttering, because most stutterers never get a chance to hear themselves without stuttering. So they think there's something wrong with them. And it's important for stutterers to know that the truth is that there's really nothing wrong with them. And I use humor to help because I'm a comedy writer. So I say to them, listen, would you ever walk in the street all bent over and make believe that you have something wrong with your back? And they say, of course, I would never do that. I'm like, then why would you make believe that you can't speak properly? You know, if you have to say something important to someone, would you say, hey, I have something to tell you, and then grab yourself by the throat and choke yourself so you couldn't speak? No, I would never do that. I said, then why don't you allow yourself to say what you need to say? I use humor, I use absurdity, I use everything because you have to convince your subconscious mind that you no longer need to stutter. And
So-
when you do that, you allow yourself to stop.
Okay, so when you started to see progress and realize that this was a psychological issue that you could conquer, is that when you became funny, or were you always a funny kid?
No, I was always, when I was 12 years old, I must have been a really weird kid because when I was 12 years old, I decided I wanted to be a dentist, and I was already writing comedy. My whole life was that split, and I was never able to decide what to do, so I wound up doing it all. You know, I couldn't really figure it out. It even confused me as a child. I'm like, you want to be a dentist, but you want to do funny stuff. So how are you going to do that? I used to I would stay up at night thinking about stuff like that, you know. The speech thing, the interesting thing is that just before I stopped stuttering, I got very nervous because who would I be? You know, as much as I hated stuttering, and I teach people who stutter, hate the stuttering but love yourself. But before you give up something that's really big, and I think it's the same if a person is very heavy and is going to lose a lot of weight, just before you reach your goal, you get really nervous because now I'm going to be a different person. Who am I going to be? As much as I hated stuttering, how am I going to be a guy who doesn't stutter? People expect me to stutter when they see me. And all those thoughts enter your mind. How am I going to explain to people? People are going to say, why don't you stutter anymore? And so there's an expectation. And I say to them, well, then they'll just have to be disappointed. That's all. You won't stutter for them anymore. You know, you don't have to stutter for people. And that's basically what we do. We take these obstacles, we give ourselves these obstacles. So I use a spiritual approach as well. And there's, I don't know, have you ever heard the Serenity Prayer? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the key. If I wasn't given the grace to have the wisdom to know that I couldn't stop stuttering, I would still be stuttering today. But I was given that grace to figure out I don't have to stutter. There's nothing really wrong with me. My throat is fine. There's nothing wrong with my vocal mechanism. I can speak perfectly.
And nobody, in all of the people that your parents took you to, all the therapists, nobody could help you.
I got worse from going to those classes. I was surrounded by other kids who stuttered, and by hearing them stutter, it convinced me that there was something wrong with me. They would give me kind of exercises, but nobody ever told me that I could get rid of it. They tell you that you can improve it. I actually called a very famous stuttering institute to offer my help a couple of years ago, and I got the head of the institute on the phone, probably because I said it's Dr. Gurian calling. You know, people tend to pick up when it's a doctor.
That's
you
why
know,
you became
I have
a
to
dentist.
use that, so I can use that once in a while. Yeah, and he said he shocked me by saying no one has ever been cured of stuttering. Those were his words. And I said, you know, then either I'm like a psychopath and I'm just trying to waste your time making up a story, or maybe I have something that could be helpful to you. I said, I'm really shocked that you would say that. And there are a lot of people out there who continue to believe that it's a physical problem, that there's something in your DNA. I don't think you can get rid of a physical problem by changing your location. If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room by himself and suddenly walk perfectly. You know? But if you're a stutterer and you can speak perfectly in one room, then you can speak perfectly wherever you go.
Jeffrey, you always fascinate me. Your stories are so compelling, and the proof here is in the pudding. Here you are, many years after you worked on this very devastating issue for you. How many years were you stuttering?
Well, I stuttered badly from the time I was 6 to like 20, probably like 17 years,
A
18
very long
years.
period of time.
Long period of time.
And here you're speaking, of course, perfectly and have been for so many years. It really is an amazing story. When we return, more amazing stories from Jeffrey, because you don't stop here. I mean, this is just one of the many things you do. You're actually doing a fundraiser for another cause.
Diabetes fundraiser.
For diabetes.
Coming up, yeah.
Want to talk about that? That's going to be a
Great.
great event in New York. That's coming up next on Valerie's New York.